The silence at the dinner table was a granite slab, heavy and cold, but the only thing pressing on me was the sheer, suffocating effort of keeping my hands steady. I'm Honora Vance, 72, and a few hours ago, I realized my daughter-in-law, Blythe, had stolen my wedding ring. Not a cheap trinket, mind you, but it wasn't the gold or the opal I was grieving. It was the principle, the invasion, the sheer predatory nerve. I sat there, watching her across the polished mahogany. Blythe was perfect, of course, impeccably dressed, her hand resting conspicuously on my son Theron's, but her eyes were magnets, drawn repeatedly to the new, awful bareness of my finger. I'd removed the ring earlier, the dull platinum band with its unique black opal. I don't know why, a compulsion. And now, it was gone. The plumber was here today fixing the guest bath, I stated, my voice as level as the tabletop, a thin wire of steel. I focused on Theron, watching him shrink into his collar, perpetually anxious. He was quite thorough, but I don't believe he went into my bedroom safe. Blythe's smile, usually a flawless shield, flickered. A safe, Honora. Goodness, I didn't know you kept anything that valuable hidden away. That was the thing about Blythe. She was always fishing, always probing for the limits of my patience or the extent of my fortune. I slowly brought my water glass to my lips. My hand, despite my best effort to impose calm, gave me away with a tremor that barely rippled the surface. Old age is a betrayal, giving away your internal state when you need stoicism the most. Don't move, don't breathe, survive. That was the quiet, cold command I gave myself, the mantra my late husband Sylvan taught me decades ago. Then I saw it. Glinting beneath the silk cuff of Blythe's blouse was a barely visible but deep purple bruise. It had nothing to do with the ring, but the sudden sight of that violence disturbed the waters. Blythe was volatile, manipulative, yes, but who was she fighting? My son? Or someone else? I felt a sudden, sickening swirl of guilt. Had I been so focused on protecting the money, I'd forgotten to protect the boy? I set the glass down with a slight, unnecessary clink that echoed too loudly in the massive dining room. It wasn't hidden, dear. It was in the locker box on the dressing table, the one my late husband, Sylvan, insisted I never take off, the wedding band. She laughed, too quickly, the sound grating. Honora, darling, you must have simply misplaced it. I'll help you look tomorrow. She took a drink of wine, but her hand was trembling. And the movement was enough. The black opal, though small, had a distinctive starburst inclusion visible only under direct light. And in the low, controlled lighting of the dining room, I could swear I saw that faint, unique pattern reflecting just for a moment in the corner of Blythe's eye. She hadn't misplaced it. She had internalized its location, its very image. It was a terrifying, almost psychic confirmation. I forced myself to finish the wine. It tasted like ash, like a promise of things to come. I had no evidence, only a hunch and a deep-seated fear. Before I took another breath, I knew my next move had to be silent and, above all, legal. I needed to move, but I couldn't alert her. I needed an anchor. That's why before dinner, I'd already placed a call to my attorney, Mr. Cresswell. The lawyer said, "Do not accuse, simply observe and secure." This was about pride now. I wouldn't beg, but I would control the narrative. I stood up, pushing back my heavy chair.
The tiny strain in my hip made me rub my knee reflexively. If I've misplaced it, Blythe, it will be found. But until then, I've decided to move ahead with a few changes to the family trust. Just preemptive. You understand. The black opal legacy requires some attention. I watched her eyes widen. She wanted to know what that meant, therefore, she couldn't flee. I wouldn't be able to get through any of this without knowing I'm not totally alone. If you've ever felt that cold, sickening twist of betrayal, knowing someone you love might be using you, please just click like on this video so I know I'm connecting with someone. It's the only thing that keeps me going right now. And I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe so you can see how this awful story ends.
The next morning, the silence was still there, but it was hollow now, an echo of the accusation I hadn't made. I did not look for the ring. That would be admitting defeat, or worse, admitting I believed the lie. A proud 73-year-old doesn't beg for her jewelry back. She sets a trap. Instead, I took action. My hip was aching. The constant stress always seized up my left side. So I moved slowly, but deliberately. I asked Theron to fetch me a specific leather-bound volume from Sylvan's library, The History of American Cartography, utterly unremarkable. Thank you, dear. Sylvan loved old maps. I just felt like having a memory nearby. I manufactured a smile, gentle and harmless, the harmless grandmother she expected. Blythe was watching from the doorway, suspicion clouding her face, her body language tight. That old thing, you never touched it when Sylvan was alive. It was just clutter. I held the book, running my thumb over the stiff, dry spine. Yes, well, things change, don't they? Like where one leaves a wedding ring. I did not give her a full glare, just a casual glance. My voice was calm, but inside I was a coiled spring. I was tired of this whole facade, but I knew I had to maintain the quiet rhythm. The legal strategy required patience. The rest of the day was a theater. Blythe moved with forced helpfulness, attempting to be near me, trying to gauge my reactions. She offered to clean my room, her eyes darting toward the dressing table. I politely declined, the chill in my voice enough for her to retract her hand quickly. The tension was now palpable, moving from silent accusation to active maneuvering. It felt like walking across a floor paved with broken glass. Every movement was a risk. Later that afternoon, I was on a quiet call with my attorney, Mr. Cresswell. I made sure to sit near the library window, the only place Blythe had to be near without being in the room. I discussed a minor trust amendment, a legitimate piece of business, but it was my cover. Blythe, feigning interest in gardening, was directly outside. The air smelled of damp earth and the neighbor's barbecue, grounding the high tension in suburban reality. I lowered my voice to a whisper, audible only to my ear and the phone. And, Mr. Cresswell, that provision regarding the black opal legacy must be updated immediately. I need that done by end of day. Blythe flinched. I saw it through the glass. Her eyes, wide and greedy, immediately shifted from the hydrangeas. Black opal legacy? She'd heard me use the term last night, but to hear it tied to a deadline and a major legal provision, it was the first taste of fear, the first time the game felt bigger than her petty theft. Therefore, she was hooked. That evening, Theron was out on a late business dinner. I listened to the house settle. It was an old house. Every floorboard had its own story. The squeak of the third stair up was my signal that Blythe had taken her sleeping pill and retired early. I waited until the clock chimed 2. My hands were perfectly steady now. The tremor was gone, replaced by a cold focus. I went to the library, retrieved the cartography book, and pressed a barely visible, aged clasp on the spine. It wasn't a book. It was a shell. The cover opened, not to maps, but to a hollowed-out compartment. Inside, nestled on red velvet, was a tiny vintage leather key fob.
It was heavy, dull, and entirely forgettable. The foreshadowing seed. It looked like something you'd get from a lost luggage counter 30 years ago. I ran my finger over the worn leather. Sylvan gave this to me years ago and swore me to silence. This fob was the real thing. The thing Bly's theft was distracting me from. The simple, plain object that felt incidental but was anything but. My phone, on the table near me, began to ring. It wasn't Theron. It was an anonymous number displaying a single line of text. 39 million transfer complete. I didn't answer. I stared at the key fob, then at the unsettling message. The tension spiked, not from fear of loss, but from a sudden, dizzying realization. Sylvan's preparations weren't just for my protection. They were active. The automated defense system had started moving assets based on her action. I quickly checked my calendar. I had an appointment with Dr. Okono tomorrow, a legitimate medical checkup, but it was my perfect excuse to get out of the house. The doctor prescribed x-rays, which meant I'd be gone for hours, a necessary alibi. An agency move to ensure I could follow up on this transfer while Blythe was unsupervised. I clutched the key fob in my palm, the old leather feeling solid and strangely comforting. I had just initiated an audit, a massive internal move of funds, but I hadn't moved them myself. The question was who had set up this trigger and why? The message was proof the system was live, but it didn't tell me where the money went. I felt a surge of panic mixed with defiance. The money was moving and I was holding an old key I didn't know the lock to. I had to look harmless for one more day. Therefore, I had to hide the fact that I knew about the transfer. I crept back to my room, the floorboard silent this time, the clenched key fob leaving an angry impression on my skin. Blythe was now maneuvering against me, but she didn't know. She was already playing a far deadlier game against a ghost. The power had shifted, subtly, but undeniably. The clock was ticking, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules of the time limit.
The next morning, the dynamic shattered. Blythe wasn't playing the role of the helpful daughter-in-law anymore. She was moving to seize control. She didn't mention the ring. Instead, she cornered me in the sunroom with an aggressive sweetness, holding a large signed document. This was it, the first crack in her flimsy facade. "Honora, I know how much you worry about Theron's stability," she began, her tone laced with faux sympathy. Her hands, I noted, were perfectly steady this time, indicating absolute resolute. "I've had Mr. Cresswell draft this amendment to the Living Trust. It simply puts the financial management of the Vance estate provisionally under Theron and myself. It ensures the longevity of the family wealth should anything happen to you." I didn't need to read it. I recognized the predatory language of a hostile takeover. This wasn't about the ring anymore. This was about the house, the accounts, the control. This was a logical escalation of her greed, moving from simple theft to deep financial betrayal. The pride I felt yesterday, that cold stoicism, was instantly replaced by a flash of suppressed fury. I took the paper. My expression was unreadable, which always rattled her. "This is rather presumptuous, Blythe. Do you truly believe I am incapable of managing my own affairs?" "Of course not, darling, but this is about the future, about security." Blythe's hand, the one with the hidden bruise, hovered over the signature line. It was an insult draped in velvet. I felt the tiny antique leather key fob tucked into the pocket of my dressing gown, the foreshadowing seed from the library. I fingered the worn leather lightly. "You know, Sylvan always said that the truly valuable things in life are never signed for and never kept in plain sight. They're usually unlocked with something utterly worthless." Blythe's eyes narrowed, searching my face for double meaning, but finding none.
She missed the warning completely. She was so focused on the signature, she couldn't see the trap closing. This small defense, this cryptic line, bought me time. I put the document down on the glass table, taking out my pen. Blythe's face momentarily lit up with greedy triumph, a flicker of pure, unmasked avarice. But instead of signing, I circled one section of the document, the clause relating to the marital asset exclusion. This clause, I stated, my voice quiet but firm. It protects Theron from your potential future debts. Yet, it also prevents any asset acquired through the inheritance of Sylvan's personal effects from being leveraged. Blythe went utterly cold. Her jaw tightened. She hadn't realized that section, which felt like boilerplate legal text, was so important. The ring, the personal effect, now felt less like a trinket and more like a tripwire I had just identified. My counter move cost me nothing, but it cost her everything she thought she was securing. The pressure from the outside intensified immediately. Blythe, realizing her quick, clean takeover attempt had failed, grew desperate. She started openly questioning my judgment in front of Theron, subtly planting seeds of doubt about my memory and my appointment with Dr. Racano. She's forgetting things, Theron. She almost forgot to pay the property taxes last month. A lie, of course, but it worked. Theron started looking at me with worry, a terrible, destabilizing fear that I was losing control, not just of my finances, but of my mind. The betrayal deepened, the atmosphere worsened. I was forced to make a small decision, one that felt trivial but was necessary. I retrieved the key fob from my pocket and slipped it into the cover of my journal titled Lattice Work. I chose not to use the safe. Why? Because I knew Blythe would look in the safe now. This small choice, ignoring the obvious security, was necessary to keep my real defense hidden. I offered a temporary truce. I'll consider the document, Blythe, but for now, let's keep things civil for Theron's sake. No more talk of trusts until the end of the week. Maybe it's fine now. But I immediately undercut it with a hint. As I walked past the antique secretary desk, I paused. There, on the edge, was a fresh, almost invisible scratch. Blythe had been searching the library again. The momentary relief vanished, replaced by heightened suspicion. The stakes escalated again, threatening something closer to my heart, my reputation. I received a sudden, icy call from Mrs. Delgado, my bridge club president. She informed me in a voice dripping with moral judgment that I was being asked to take a leave of absence due to recent domestic unpleasantness. The gossip had started. Blythe was weaponizing social shame against me, costing me my standing in the community, building emotional weight without full payoff yet. I realized I had not merely taken the ring, she had taken a piece of my dignity. Therefore, I had to fight back where she lived, in the world of appearances. It's hard to talk about this part, the shame, the feeling that everyone is looking at you, judging you. That's why I'm sharing this. If you've ever had to deal with betrayal, it can make you feel completely isolated. Knowing I have people who believe me makes all the difference. Drop a comment below if you're listening and like the video to help this reach someone else who needs to know they aren't alone. Thank you. I finally stood, towering over Blythe with a sudden intimidating grace. My reflection in the window showed not a tired old woman, but a formidable opponent. You are in deeper water than you know, Blythe. That ring wasn't worth $3,000 or $30,000. It was worth the key it represented. And you've just taken possession of a luck you never imagined existed. The implication, that the simple act of taking the ring had placed Blythe in unforeseen danger, perhaps legal or criminal, made her gulp. She didn't steal a trinket, she triggered a mechanism. She didn't just steal the ring, she used it to trigger the automated $39 million transfer, the one from the text. Her petty theft was exponential. I knew she was trying to locate the key fob, but I had just moved it. She didn't know about the money moving yet, but she was deeply unnerved. "What luck, Honora? What are you hiding?" Her voice was a low, desperate hiss. I looked at the newly placed key fob. I looked at the scratch on the secretary desk. I knew she was planning her next move, a bigger search. I had revealed one layer of danger, but I hadn't revealed the second key. I took a deep, shaky breath, the air thick with tension. I had the key to the estate's salvation in my pocket, but I felt trapped in my own house. The question now was, how far had the transfer gone, and did the second key lead to rescue or ruin?
The next 72 hours weren't a pause, they were a silent war of attrition. Blythe didn't confess, and I didn't sign the trust documents. Instead, she began isolating Theron with calculated cruelty, using the fear I was losing my mind as her primary weapon. She started small. A misplaced letter, a mumbled, "I don't remember," she forced me to admit to. Theron, seeing his mother's sudden interest in obscure legal documents and the very real coldness between us, sided weakly with his wife. He wasn't malicious, just terrified of conflict, of the financial ruin Blythe painted for him. His trust in me was slipping, and that hurt more than the theft. The environmental pressure was closing in, the opening constriction. Suddenly, rules changed. The household staff, the people I had trusted for decades, were subtly answering to Blythe, not me. Mrs. Juarez, the housekeeper, now asked Blythe if I was allowed certain deliveries. It felt like my own walls were turning against me, something locked away, my authority. I realized Blythe was manipulating third parties to tighten the noose, showing her control wasn't just over Theron, but the system around me. I decided to take quiet action. While I maintained the facade of an anxious, forgetful widow, I began discreet communication with my old friends, Sylvan's peers, the power brokers of old New York finance. I didn't ask for help, only for information. I needed to know the full extent of Sylvan's paranoia. I called Judge Davies, a contemporary of Sylvan's, under the guise of inquiring about a charity ball. Judge, has the Vance file, the one Sylvan called the contingency plan, ever been audited? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed and told me to be careful, but the lawyer confirmed the file was secure. That was enough. I had an ally, however distant. But something slipped out of my control. Yesterday, I found Theron looking up divorce lawyers on my old desktop computer. He was terrified, not of losing Blythe, but of what she might take from him. I hadn't realized how deep her manipulation had gone, or how close he was to breaking. The discovery sent a shiver of true paranoia through me. I didn't snap, but I spent an hour just pacing my room, avoiding the dining room. I drank an entire pot of weak Earl Grey tea. My focus shattered. I was leaking paranoia into my behavior. Blythe, frantic after my vague threat about the lock, began searching the house in earnest when I went out for my appointment with Dr. Okono. She wasn't looking for the safe anymore. She was looking for a vault, a ledger, any sign of something billion-dollar worthy. I returned home to find her in the library, not reading, but aggressively wiping down the spine of The History of American Cartography with a cleaning cloth. The strong, sweet scent of bleach cut through the air, an irritant to my senses. "Dusting, Honora. This room is simply filthy." A transparent lie. I knew she was searching for the hidden clasp. I smiled faintly, but the smile didn't reach my eyes.
Blythe, a little dirt won't hurt the value of a book, but lying will certainly hurt the value of a marriage. I didn't accuse, but the direct insinuation that I knew what she was doing acted like a deal struck. The gloves were off. She was starting to realize I wasn't just a worried old woman. This wasn't just direct opposition, it was layered opposition. Blythe started spreading subtle rumors among our social circle, not about money, but about my health. An ally, my dearest friend, Mrs. Yanez, called me, her voice tentative. "Honora, are you sure you should be driving? Blythe mentioned your hands shaking." The doubt was contagious, an ally starting to doubt me. It didn't explode yet, but I knew my credibility was deteriorating, foreshadowing a heavy consequence. That evening, Blythe found something. I could feel her victory from across the house. Tucked beneath the carpet in my walk-in closet was a single, laminated card. It was a blank access key, the type used for private buildings, with a highly stylized monogram. Beneath the monogram, in tiny script, were coordinates: 40.7128, that north, 74.0060, that west, New York City. Blythe felt a rush of adrenaline. She palmed the card. I hadn't left it there. Sylvan's system had. Then a message popped up on her phone, sent from Theron's email, but clearly not from him. It was a single line of text. "If you use the key, you will lose everything. No turning back." This felt like a moment of triumph. The system I set in motion was working. I had dodged the bullet of the trust signing, but this new threat, this ultimatum, wasn't from me. It had to be the system itself, Sylvan's final insurance policy. I felt empowered for 30 seconds, but that feeling cracked open instantly. If the system was communicating directly with her, it meant it was entirely out of my control. The false win was a deception. I looked at my hand, at the bare platinum band that wasn't there. I had planned for her petty greed, but I hadn't planned for an autonomous counter system that communicated in threats. I realized with sickening clarity that the ultimatum wasn't a warning to her, but a trap set by the system itself to ensure the asset transfer was triggered. I had protected the money from Blythe's hands, but I may have pushed her into a pit designed by my dead husband. I was just the distraction. The question wasn't what she would lose, it was who was behind the email and what would I lose if she went through with it.
The next day, I woke up to chaos. The house felt wrong, the stillness of the previous days replaced by a frantic, low-level hum. Blythe had ignored the ultimatum. Greed, that single magnetic pull, was too strong. She told Theron she was visiting her ailing mother for the weekend and took a private car to Manhattan. The fact that she was gone didn't bring relief. It brought the certainty that the detonator had been pushed. But the explosion wasn't in New York yet. It was here. Theron, fully marinated in Blythe's paranoia and fear, cornered me in the living room. He was angry. A raw, ugly, panicked kind of anger I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. He was shaking, not with rage, but with fear of the collapse. I looked at my son, seeing his father's kindness poisoned by his wife's manipulation. My head felt heavy, and I had to adjust my glasses to clear my vision. Theron, I am not trying to hurt you. I am trying to keep you safe from a legacy that is far more dangerous than you can comprehend. He wouldn't listen. His voice was raw, laced with the terrible, costly assumption that his mother, the one person he should trust, was the irrational party. His trust in me was shattered completely. This damage felt irreversible. I held my hand out to him, showing him my bare ring finger. I was tired of playing the fool. That ring was special, not because of its value, but because of its history. Your father told me years ago that if it ever left my hand, and not by my choice, it meant I was initiating an internal audit of the entire financial structure. He knew Blythe. He knew what she was capable of.
This private confession exposed the deeper stakes. Sylvan, my late husband, had anticipated Blythe's betrayal and built a failsafe. It wasn't about me catching her. It was about her fulfilling his prophecy. Fear was turning to anger, then to a profound, sickening hurt that Theron still didn't see the truth. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in Manhattan, Blythe found the building, an anonymous, imposing structure in the financial district, corresponding to the coordinates. The security was invisible, but absolute. She slipped the access card, the one she took from my closet, into a discreet slot in the marble wall. The small black opal ring taped inside her shoe was useless as a biometric component. The vault door did not open. She was running out of time. Frustrated, she made a reckless move. She called Theron's phone, intending to rant, but I picked up. "Where is it, Honora? What's the damn pin?" she hissed. Her breathing was ragged, audible over the expensive connection. "The pin, Blythe? You know I can't help you with that. But I can tell you this. I've just finished filing a report with Mr. Cresswell's office regarding the systematic theft and misrepresentation of marital assets. The lawyer said any action taken after that filing is considered an act of financial aggression." I hung up. I lied about the timing of the filing, using legal pressure to force her hand, and the knowledge of that moral compromise sat like lead in my stomach. The damage was spreading. While Blythe was frantic, I received an official notice. The managing board of the Vance Trust had called an emergency meeting, citing my recent erratic behavior as the cause. Something I thought was secure, my position as chair, was now cracking under the pressure of the rumors Blythe had seeded. Blythe, now in a panicked frenzy at the vault entrance, was about to leave when the small, almost invisible screen near the door lit up. It was a password prompt. The light, cold and electric blue, was blinding. Under the prompt was a single line of text. PIN code. The day the ring was stolen. Blythe's blood ran cold. She knew I knew. I hadn't just suspected the theft. I had used the date of the theft itself as the final immutable trigger for the system. A secret revealed that destroyed any hope of fragile trust or plausible deniability. She frantically typed in the date of the theft. The massive seamless vault door finally slid open, revealing not gold bars, but a single, ancient filing cabinet and a holographic screen. This was the peak of the collapse. It wasn't the theft that mattered, it was the exposure of the motive. Blythe realized in that single gut-wrenching moment that she hadn't found a treasure. She had found the tripwire. The betrayal was complete, but it was her betrayal being confirmed by the system, not mine. The room hummed with the sound of the server farm, the air cold and sterile. No going back. I stood in my quiet living room, the phone hot in my hand, knowing she was inside. I had won the battle of the trust, but I was seconds away from the truth being fully exposed, the truth that was bigger than the ring and bigger than the theft. The entire financial security of the Vance legacy now rested on a single date she had just entered. The question was, what did that holographic screen show? And how irreversible was the chain reaction I had just tricked her into starting? The next day began not with the clanging chaos of a vault door, but with silence. A silence so complete it felt like a vacuum where my hope for my son used to be. The house smelled faintly of dust and old wood, the smell of a life that had just been shattered. I found myself in the garden, standing next to a broken terracotta pot, the dirt spilling out like viscera. I was alone with a cold, heavy truth. I was responsible for the wreckage. The immediate cost was already clear. Theron hadn't spoken to me since Blythe's call. He was confined to his study, doors locked, avoiding me. The easy, uncomplicated love of my son was gone. He hadn't sided with her publicly yet, but he had retreated into a shell of distrust. I was physically drained. My knees were stiff and screaming from the hours of sleepless pacing, and I had to stop and rub my temples to stave off the onset of a blinding headache. This was the processing phase. I shuffled slowly back inside, the effort of walking across the polished marble feeling immense. Don't move, don't breathe, survive. The mantra, Sylvan's phrase, returned, but it tasted darker now, heavier. Survive. At what cost? How did I let it get here? I had spent decades securing a legacy, but I had failed to secure the one thing that mattered, Theron's unconditional trust. I questioned myself, consumed by guilt and shame. My pride had demanded silence, and my silence had fueled Blythe's lies. I kept going back to the sight of that purple bruise on Blythe's wrist. Had I misjudged the violence? Or was her greed simply so vast it consumed everything, even her own safety? The contradiction was maddening, fueling my internal spiral. The consequences continued to ripple outward. Mr. Cresswell called, his voice tight. The emergency board meeting had convened. While my position as chair was safe for now, the board had issued a formal letter of censure, demanding a full financial audit of the Vance Trust by an independent third party. The money was safe, but my reputation was irrevocably damaged among the only people who mattered in this city. This was the secondary ripple cost. Something I thought was safe, my credibility, was now damaged. I had to call Dr. Okono to reschedule my checkup, explaining that the family pressure was too much. The act of rescheduling felt like a retreat, another small loss of control. Later, a side character emerged, Judge Davies, my old ally and Sylvan's contemporary. He arrived unannounced, walking slowly across the lawn. He didn't offer comfort, he offered confrontation. His face was stern, etched with decades of knowing the true cost of power. "You should have come to me sooner, Honora. Sylvan designed this system to run autonomously if the trigger, the ring, was taken. He didn't trust Blythe, but he didn't trust you to be objective either. The moment she entered that date, the system designated her as a hostile actor and executed the permanent transfer. You were complicit by allowing the scenario to play out." The dialogue revealed uncomfortable truths. I had thought I was controlling the trap, but I was merely a puppet in Sylvan's grand, posthumous play. "I only wanted to protect Theron," I whispered, shame washing over me. "Protection or control?" Judge Davies countered, his eyes sharp. "You didn't let her steal a trinket, Honora. You allowed her to steal the chance for Theron to learn how to stand up for himself. That's the true cost. And now the situation is much worse than a simple trust fund theft." This realization was agonizing. Judge Davies warned me that Blythe, having accessed the vault, now knew the name of the foundation the money was transferred to. "She will fight you in the courts, Honora. She knows the stakes are still high. She knows about the artifacts. You have to remember, the original purpose of the Black Opal legacy was to protect Sylvan's secret life's work, not just your nest egg. That's the part that is not legal, and she knows it." This forced me back into action. Survival wasn't over. The fight was now existential, not just financial. I returned to the library. I needed clarity. I needed the final piece. I went to the antique secretary desk, the one where I'd seen the scratch. I opened the lattice work journal, retrieving the small, dull, vintage leather fob, the physical foreshadowing seed. I held it, running my finger over the worn leather. Suddenly, the revelation hit me. It wasn't a document I needed, it was the date of the vault's creation. The one Sylvan always called the day the game began. I looked again at the journal, but not the key fob. Tucked beneath the back cover, stuck there with Sylvan's distinctive clear tape, was the original carbon copy receipt for the Black Opal ring purchase, the one I thought I'd lost decades ago. The receipt wasn't for the ring, it was for a $2.3 billion purchase of rare proprietary financial instruments executed on the very day Sylvan gave me the ring. The date on the receipt was the true PIN for the vault's control system, the actual key to reversing the transfer. Blythe had used the date of the theft, so she had secured the transfer. If she had used the date of the purchase on the receipt, she would have secured control for herself. The original object, the ring, was the catalyst, but the receipt was the actual tool. The revelation was betrayal, heartbreaking in its clarity. Sylvan made sure there were two possible pins, one for protection and one for theft. This kind of betrayal, built layer by layer over decades, it makes you question everything. I hope that by sharing this, you can find the strength to trust your instincts, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. If you're with me and you believe in the power of knowing the full story, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. We need to stay connected for what comes next. I looked at the receipt, then back at the dull, ugly key fob in my hand. I had the power to undo Sylvan's trap and reinstate the money to Theron. But if I did that, Blythe would come back armed with the vault's contents. The $1 billion was secure, but my moral and legal fight had just begun. I took a deep, resolving breath, the scent of fresh-cut grass mingling with the cold, metallic smell of old paper. I knew what the legal truth was, but I needed to find out what Blythe had done with the information on that holographic screen before I could make my final move.
The showdown took place not in the elegant parlor I would have chosen, but in the sterile, high-ceilinged, unforgiving office of Mr. Cresswell. I walked in, my back stiff, not from pride this time, but from the sheer exhaustion of carrying this secret. My hip throbbed with every step, a painful reminder of my age and the impossible pressure. The scent of ozone and freshly waxed wood was overpowering, a cold, unnatural atmosphere for such a raw confrontation. Blythe, flown back from New York, was hysterical, her makeup running, her polished facade totally shattered. Theron was standing near the window, his posture collapsed, confused and devastated. I was simply calm, the stillness a terrible effort of will. The foundation of last resort, Blythe, I explained, my voice low and steady, laying a sheaf of legal documents on the desk. It's controlled by me and me alone. The instant you use the PIN code, the date of your own theft, every liquid asset moved out of the Vance family trust. You didn't steal the money. You initiated the full exposure of your own motive. Therefore, you triggered the transfer. Her control was not just gone, it had been weaponized against her. I watched her face, the way her eyes darted from the documents to my face, searching for a lie, for a weakness. She found neither. Blythe didn't turn on me. She turned on the closest, weakest target. "You idiot!" she shrieked at Theron, her voice raw, her mask off completely. "Your mother just ruined us. She knew all along. She set me up." This was the core confrontation. Theron finally saw the raw, calculating venom beneath his wife's polished veneer. He looked at the legal documents that showed his wife's date-stamped entry into the vault and the resulting automated legal transfer. The documents weren't an accusation. They were a geometric proof. His face collapsed. That was my first silent, agonizing victory. Blythe's betrayal of him was now undeniable, but my son was still hurt and confused. The cost of this proof was tearing him in half. Blythe, seeing Theron recoil, made her desperate countermove. She snatched the set of papers that detailed the legal transfer. "This is coercion! I'll tell the IRS about those artifacts and bring this whole house of cards down." She was cornered, her hands trembling with rage, and she didn't care who she took down with her. This was the moment I was physically afraid, but I couldn't show it. I gripped the armrest of my chair, muttering the mantra, "Don't move, don't breathe, survive." The air felt tight, like a drum skin about to burst. I merely smiled. It was the coldest expression I had ever worn.
You're welcome to. But you'll notice I never mentioned artifacts. I mentioned the foundation. The foundation of last resort is a legitimate, audited entity. The moment you opened that vault, every piece of dubious property, as you call it, was legally transferred into a trust held by a foreign sovereign entity. The lawyer said if you tell the IRS now, they will investigate you for attempting to leverage ill-gotten gains based on a theft you yourself committed. You have no credible witness and no proof, only a stolen wedding ring. My countermove was complete, devastatingly legal and airtight. The antagonist had revealed her trump card, but it failed. Theron, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice cracked with pain. He was still reeling from the shock, the denial giving way to a sickening grief that twisted his face. He stood up, looking at his wife's exposed malice, the woman who screamed "idiot" at him when her plan failed. He walked slowly to Mr. Cresswell's side. It felt like everything was slowing down. The quiet hum of the air conditioning, the distant street noise, the pounding in my own ears. The light in the room seemed to dim, as if trying to shield us from the ugliness. In that stillness, Theron made his choice, his voice flat with finality. Draft the divorce papers, Mr. Cresswell, immediately. Include the marital asset exclusion clause. I want her gone. I want nothing from her, but I want her to take nothing from me. This decision, the destruction of the marriage, spiked the emotional consequence to a new, higher level. I had secured the money, but I had lost my son's happy family. I felt a surge of overwhelming sorrow, quickly replaced by a fierce wave of maternal rage against Blythe for having poisoned him so thoroughly. Blythe was completely cornered. She screamed, not a sound of distress, but of pure financial humiliation, a sound that grated against the glass windows of the office. She lunged forward, grabbing the object that started it all. She threw the stolen wedding ring onto the mahogany desk. It landed with a dull, small clink next to the divorce papers. The emotional anchor, the ring, had reappeared, but now it was a symbol of ruin. I watched, impassive, as Blythe was escorted out of the office by Mr. Cresswell's security, publicly undone, stripped of the fortune and the marriage in 1 hour. I wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was the hollow echo of Theron's grief. I looked at the ring, then at Theron, whose shoulders were slumped in utter defeat. I had won the legal war, but I lost the peace. The rage dissolved, leaving only resolve. I took a final deep breath, tasting the dry, stale air of the office. Don't move, don't breathe. Win. The mantra had shifted from survival to victory. I reached out my hand and gently picked up the black opal ring from the desk, dusting the faint residue of mahogany polish from the platinum band. As I held it, my thumb brushed the unique starburst inclusion. I felt a strange coldness from the metal, a sensation that went beyond temperature. It was then, holding the ring that triggered all this chaos, that I remembered the text message. If you use the key, you will lose everything. No turning back. Blythe had used the key, and she had lost everything. But the message hadn't been from me. The system had sent it, confirming that an invisible entity, Sylvan's other half of the plan, was controlling the flow. The massive sum was secured, but I still didn't have the full picture. I looked down at the key fob tucked into my pocket, the one I had retrieved with the receipt. It was the second key, the real key, which had nothing to do with Blythe's theft. I had kept it safe, therefore I still had leverage. I had defeated the daughter-in-law, but I still had to confront the architect. The fight with Blythe was over, but the war against Sylvan's complicated, cruel legacy had just begun. Was the vault open to save the fortune, or was it open to reveal me to a far more dangerous foe?
The lawyers ensured the financial mechanisms worked exactly as Sylvan had designed. Blythe was defeated. The divorce papers were drafted immediately, ensuring the marital asset exclusion clause protected Theron entirely from inheriting any financial liability related to his mother's assets. The betrayal was answered and the fortune secured. Theron, broken but grateful, began the slow, agonizing process of rebuilding his life with me. A week later, the storm had passed, leaving behind a profound stillness. I stood alone in the library, the air thick with the smell of old paper and quiet victory. I held the black opal ring. I finally put it back on. The platinum felt cold on my finger, a final, heavy acceptance of my role as the guardian. Blythe had stolen the ring, but that action had successfully secured a billion-dollar legacy that now rested squarely on my hand. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, 73, tired, but victorious. I saw the answer to the story's very first tension. The theft wasn't the disaster. It was the mechanism of salvation. Sylvan had designed the system to use her greed to trigger the one legal action necessary to protect the entire family from her. It was emotionally satisfying, but it was not fully closed. Then the final twist hit, delivered not by a lawyer, but by technology. My phone vibrated. It was a new text message. The number was different from the one that had sent the initial $39 million transfer alert. The text was simple, unsettling, and chilling. "The ring is back where it belongs. I'm glad you're safe, Honora. But the second key is still in play." I froze. My hand holding the ring went instantly rigid. I hadn't told anyone about the key fob, the one hidden in the cartography book, the key I had retrieved along with the receipt. That was the real secret, the one that had nothing to do with Blythe's petty theft. Blythe was just the distraction. Someone else, much more dangerous and still active, had been watching the entire time. They knew about the transfer, and they knew about the hidden key fob I still held. This was the emotional turn, the gut punch moment. Sylvan's plan was perfect to stop Blythe, but it had inadvertently exposed me to a hidden partner, or perhaps a rival, who had access to the system's deep surveillance protocols. The money was safe, but the entire scenario had simply been a vetting process, a way to confirm the ring was secured and the next layer could be activated. I offered myself resolution, drawing wisdom from the agonizing journey. The lesson was clear. Legacy is not wealth. It's the foresight to protect that wealth and the courage to act on instinct. We all face these battles for our dignity and family, and sometimes the only way to win is to trust the suspicion that hurts the most. If you've watched this far, I hope you see that the biggest danger isn't always the loud, obvious one. It's the quiet, calculated betrayal you don't see coming. I looked down at the dull, antique leather key fob I'd just retrieved from my pocket. It was heavy, ordinary, and terrifying. The first key, the ring's stolen date, was used to secure the money. The second key, now activated, was clearly for something else entirely. I took a deep breath. The massive fortune secured, but the greater danger only just beginning. This story is far from over, and I need to know who else Sylvan was guarding his fortune from. If you want to join me in discovering what that second key unlocks, what deeper secret my late husband buried, please subscribe and hit that bell right now.
because the second key is activated, and I have a terrible feeling it leads to something far more sinister than financial control. Do you think Sylvan's system was designed to protect me or to lure me into the next trap?